Thanks so much, Jeannie. Hola, AHSIE.
Hola.
¿Cómo están? Qué bueno, qué bueno. So glad to be back in Chicago and at this wonderful conference. I've spoken to some of you here just a little bit earlier, and the energy I get here is a lot of love, a lot of cariño, a lot of you that are working not just with your minds, but also with your hearts. And so I congratulate you for everything that you do. You're at the front lines, and we need you as validating agents to help all of our students to succeed. So let me begin with a little bit about myself and how I come to this journey. As many of you know, I've been doing this kind of work now for a long, long time. In fact, I was remembering, and it was very touching when I was at the Chicago Hilton last night, because in the early 80s, I was a young, aspiring scholar. I wanted to make a difference for our people. And I remember that I went to many a conference there. And in fact, my friend Hector Garza and Antonio Flores from HACU started the Hispanic Caucus of the American Association of Higher Education there. And so it was really touching to walk around those hallways and those rooms where early in my 30s I had been there, and just to come back and see that is a moving experience for me. And so I come to you as someone who has experienced both a life of having nothing to a life now where I get the fabulous opportunity to speak to people like you who are so committed, who want to carry on this work of nobility, of spiritual nobility, of social justice. Your work is activism in the classroom. Your work is about equity. Your work is about helping students who grow up like me with hopes and with dreams, but often not knowing how to realize them. How do Latinos or Latinx students, how do they enter and succeed in STEM fields of study? How do you become a scientist when no one in your family is a scientist? When no one in your community is a scientist? How do you do this? How do you move on and graduate? And so these are students who, like me, often grow up with very little, with no information about how to succeed in college, with no one that can help them in the family about how to access college and financial aid and all the things that we need to succeed. And yet these students went on and earned a degree in a STEM field. What is their secret to their success? How did they do it? How does someone like me come from the barrio and ultimately earn a doctorate? How did we do it? There are some dominant narratives about our people that are all wrong. There's some dominant narratives about how people succeed that are not exactly correct. Let me give you a couple of examples of these dominant narratives. First one, only perseverance and determination can count as determinants of success. These aren't written anywhere, but they're ingrained in our consciousness. That if we only work hard enough, that we only have this determination to succeed, that's all we need. And that's ingrained. It really honors the notion of meritocracy. A second dominant narrative is that if we have too many adversities, we cannot succeed. That if we have too many challenges, like many of us and many of the students that we work with, that there's hardly anything that we can do for them, that the best that we can do is to give them some sort of decent job so that they're able to survive in society. Those are two dominant narratives. With the counter storytelling, we're trying to figure out, are those narratives correct? Is there another way that we can express what's really going on? A second tool that we employed is called testimonios, or personal stories. That comes from the book Telling to Live by the Latina feminist group. And the testimonials are a way to acknowledge the voices and experiences of people that have been historically marginalized. So let me give you some examples of these deficit-based narratives. One example is that that people believe is that, our communities, that when you look at low-income communities, that there's nothing going on there. That in these communities, there's not much that can be done, that it's just too overwhelming, that, these individuals have too many challenges, and that because they face poverty and all of these adversities, that these students will never be successful. Somehow that has become the dominant narrative in higher education, to the point that when we talk about student success in our meetings, this narrative takes over. Oh, that's too overwhelming, there's very little we can do, let's just stop the conversation right now. But I was reading this really interesting book called Supernormal. It's written by Meg Jay. Meg is a clinical psychologist at the University of Virginia. And what she did is she studied people who have overcome great adversity. And they're in our society. Some of them are celebrities, like Louis Armstrong and Eleanor Roosevelt and Frida Kahlo. And what she says is that despite adversities, she learned that people can indeed thrive. And that nearly 75 of us experience adversity by age 20. So many of you have a story to tell about how you overcame adversity, how, in fact, you had all these challenges, but still you managed to survive and to thrive. The other theoretical framework that we used is validation theory, where basically the notion here is that we as educators need to reach out to students, to help them know that we believe in them, to help them know that we are going to work with them with an ethic of care, with an ethic of cariño, with an ethic of compassion, with an ethic of knowing that despite their adversities, they too can succeed. So the Latinx scientists talked about some of the challenges that they had. Very early on, they did experience these kinds of adversities, from poverty to moving from one country to another, from a death in the family, from health issues. Definitely these students had adversities that they needed to overcome. They also had some academic challenges. I remember reading an essay from one student that had been, the star in high school and had gotten all A's, and then came to college, took some STEM courses, and found out that he needed to study a lot more. But another challenge was, the whole notion of learning English as a second language, figuring out how to do publishing and writing and presenting their work at conferences, time management. Dealing with academic failure. Sometimes they did fail a course and they said, okay, I'm going to retake this, I'm going to do better, and then they did. They kept on going despite these challenges. So let me move on to what was it that helped? How did these students do it? How did they move forward? Well, one way is that they had what we call high-impact STEM practices. These are the best practices that help students to learn and to do better in their STEM courses. At the top of that is experiential hands-on learning. These students want to know the content, they want to learn the material, but they also want to know, how do we apply this in real life? How do I take what I learn and how do I translate it into meaning into my daily life as an individual working in society? Another high-impact STEM practice is internships, especially connected to funding. Some of them were US-based, some of them had the students traveling to Spain or other parts of the world, and they spoke wonderfully about these internships. There are some people who believe that our students have no strengths, and that's why they can't make it. But what we learned from these essays is that they have a variety of strengths. These are strengths that get overlooked. People don't really pay attention to these strengths because all we're looking at is academic ability, which is important. But they have other strengths that propel them forward. So let me go over what these strengths are. One huge strength is a strength that we call giving back. These students wanted to earn a STEM degree, not just to hang the degree on the wall. I mean, that's nice. But they wanted to earn a STEM degree to make a difference in the world, to help their communities, to help society. They wanted to make a difference in the world. And another asset is what we call social justice consciousness, the recognition of inequities in societies. And that STEM is not out there by itself, it's connected to making a difference in society. And then another important asset is curiosity, having a sense of wonder, a sense of discovery. And these students had it even at an early age. What helped were student assets, navigational. These students learned to figure things out on their own. There's another beautiful movie called Spare Parts. It's about these undocumented students at Carl Hayden High School in Phoenix, Arizona, that built a robot that they called Stinky. And they figured out how to build that robot, from these spare parts. And they did such a good job, and they worked so hard that that robot beat MIT. So there's another example of our people doing well in STEM fields of study. But these students also learned to figure out college. They learned to figure out how to get financial aid. They learned to figure out, how to talk to faculty. They had this navigational ability. Guidance and perseverance, definitely there. Determination, the passion to succeed, the commitment to move on, knowing that when they finished, their parents would be so proud and that now they could use their intelligence to make a difference in society. And of course, they had academic capital. They had smarts. You have to in college. And so these students studied hard. They learned from their mistakes, and moved on. And then another thing that helped is something we call Latino cultural pedagogics. This is the cultural wealth of the Latino community. The whole notion that these students benefited from the family work ethic, that they saw their parents and their grandparents and their family members working so hard that they said, I've got to live up to that. And I remember when I was in high school and early in my college life at Laredo Community College, that my mother worked odd jobs, and one of the jobs that she had was working from 10 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning, waiting tables at the most popular restaurant in Laredo called the Western Grill. And she would come home early in the morning exhausted, and she slept during the day. And for all of that, for that whole week, she would make $15 a week plus tips. And so I watched my mom, and I said, okay, this is an ethic that I want to follow. And at the same time, I knew that I needed to work hard because I did not want to wind up that way. I didn't want my children to wind up in an environment where I would hardly be home because I was asleep. So these students learned from watching what their family members did and what their family members did for them. So the counter story dispels these entrenched narratives. I can tell you today that it's not true that perseverance alone counts for success. It's not true that Latino students are not academically proficient and cannot succeed in STEM. It's not true that individual effort and achievement alone propels students to succeed. And it's not true that all Latino families do not care about their children's educational pursuits. These are false narratives. There are myths that need to be shattered and done away with. And so the counter story, very importantly, calls for us now as educators to step up and to begin to stop talking about how students succeed against the odds. And what we need to do is to change and to improve and even to shatter those odds. If only they emulated white students. From this work, we know that students have their own ways of succeeding, their own ways of figuring things out, their own ways of knowing. We need to stop employing deficit-based language and instead focus on Latino student strengths. And we need to stop ignoring the socio-political dimensions of STEM education. To what extent is that deficit-based paradigm impacting STEM education today? What STEM policies and practices act to preclude Latinos from succeeding? And how do we bring the voices and experiences from the margins into the shaping of the future of STEM education? So here's just a couple of recommendations. I think one important thing that STEM educators can do is to play to students' strengths, to leverage these strengths, especially the strengths of giving back and social justice consciousness and curiosity. These students want to learn in a context where what they do is actually making a difference in the world. There are things such as climate change and viruses that break out, water shortages. I think some of you know that right now, next month, Cape Town, South Africa is going to run out of water. It's running out of water right now, but by then they will have no water. We've had the water crisis in Flint. We've had the drought in California. We've had the Zika virus. God knows what else is coming. We have climate change. We have so many issues that we need to give students projects that involve them in reflective, deep learning experiences so that what they learn can be applied to make a difference in the world. And we need to provide professional development to STEM faculty and staff. They need to learn how to use high-impact practices. They need to learn how to work with our students. They need to learn how to work with low-income students in a way that they can be validating agents and help them to succeed. We need to create STEM student success centers. And I know that there are many throughout the nation. We need more of them. These are hubs. We need to realize that students need a place that they can go to get information that they cannot find in their communities because they don't know anybody who's been a scientist. And of course, we need to focus on early preparation for STEM. I want to end with a beautiful quote from one of the individuals who finished a STEM degree. Her name is Martha Quiñones Soto. And she writes, "In 2011, I completed my graduate degree after many years of hard work. The first calls I made the day I received my PhD were to my abuelas, to whom I shouted, 'Yo soy doctora.' Those were heavy words. They recapped all the tears, all my struggles in graduate school, and the time away from my family. They also meant I had achieved a lifetime goal and that I had made my family proud." So many of us in this room have made our families proud, and now we're working with students so that they can make their own family proud. Our research now needs to dispel all of those myths, all of those lies, all of these things that are really injuring our students, causing pain. We need to now step up as educators who are going to act with an ethic of care, with an ethic of knowing that our students can succeed in STEM, in the arts, in any place we need them, and we stand with them. Thank you so much for all of the work that you do, and thank you for allowing me to share my work. Muchas gracias. Thank you.